Okay, I actually realized we hadn't read chapter 10 either. I don't believe. So we're going to read 10, 11, and 12 on here of Rabbit Hill. Black grief wrapped the hill. For all the younger animals, little George was the most beloved. Remember, he's gone, right? This is what had happened here. His cheerfulness and youthful enthusiasm had always brightened the days for the older ones. His unfailing willingness had made him invaluable to Mother. For Father, he had been an apt pupil and a congenial hunting companion. Congenial means happy. The long runs they had had together, the many times they had outwitted and tricked blundering dogs, all came rushing back now and overwhelmed poor Father with inconsolable sorrow. That means he couldn't be made to feel better. Mother had taken to her bed, and their daughter Hazel had been summoned from over Charcoal Hill Way to take over the running of the household. She was not a very good cook and had brought along 3 of her youngest children. Their senseless chatter drove Uncle Analdus frantic, and he avoided the burrow as much as possible, spending long, gloomy hours with Phooey, Porky, and the red buck. "What a runner he was," said the buck sadly. "What a runner. Many's the time he'd run with me clear up Weston Way, not on business, just for the fun of it. Up there and back before breakfast, and him real young, too. Sometimes I'd say, 'Are you tiring, Georgie?' And he'd only laugh. 'Tiring,' he'd say, 'only just warming up.' And away he'd go, made me stretch times to keep up." This is so sad that he died. "And a leaper," said Uncle Analdus. "Clear across Deadman's Brook he leapt. Seen the spot with my own eyes. A good 18 foot if it's an inch. Ain't no rabbit ever done that like of before. Won't be another one likely either." Porky shook his head. "Cheerful, too. Always a laughing and a singing. Don't seem right." "Them ding-blasted automobiles," Uncle Analdus raged. "I'll fix 'em, I'll get 'em. Wait till there comes a good rainy night with that ding-blasted black road all a slimy and a slippery. I'll hide me down in the curve near the bottom of the hill, and when they come a rampaging up and a roaring along, I'll skip in front of 'em. That'll wake 'em up. You'll see 'em slam on their brakes and go a skidding and a slithering and a sliding and a crashing into that there stone wall. Used to do it up in Danbury when I was younger, just for cussedness. 4 cars I wrecked on that hill up there, 3 of 'em real bad. Too old now, though," he sighed helplessly. "Ain't spry enough. They'd get me for sure." They sat in sad silence while the shadows of the pine wood crept slowly down the hill, until the setting sun turned the buckwheat to a carpet of shimmering green gold. "Always used to come a-running by about this time," Porky said. "Always called 'Good evening, Mr. Porky.' Well brung up he was. Always called me Mister. It just don't seem right." Even the approach of Midsummer's Eve did little to lift the gloom. The animals watched the garden's progress with only a half-hearted interest. Feathery carrot tops, tender pea vines with the succulent tendrils, fresh young lettuce beginning to head, jade-like cabbages, stout rows of beans, all these would formerly have been noted with ecstasy, but now no one seemed to care much. To Father, the coming eve promised more of unhappiness than pleasure, for they had planned to have a little celebration this year, he and Mother, a sort of harvest home after the storage room had been filled. All the neighbors would come in, and there would be pea vine and lettuce soup, and there was still a few small bottles of elderflower wine buried away, and there would be games and laughter and singing. It would be just like the good old days. Well, it would have been. The new storeroom had not been built. He and Uncle Analdus had no heart for it, and little Georgie was to have made the shelves. Mother had made no plans for preserving or canning. She had only recently been able to sit up in her rocker. Father sat outside the burrow in the twilight. The incessant chatter of the youngsters made indoors impossible. Hazel herself was noisy and careless with the dishes. Nearby, Uncle Analdus snapped fitfully. Suddenly, Father became aware of a small crowd hastening down the hill. He could hear Willie Fieldmouse's excited voice and the squeaking of his cousins. He could see Phooey's bright black and white and distinguish Porky's waddling bulk. As they neared the burrow, Willie broke from the rest and came galloping toward them, his voice squealing in excitement. "I've seen him," he called wildly. "I've seen him. Uncle Analdus, wake up. I've seen him. I've seen little Georgie." Bedlam broke loose. Hazel rushed to the doorway, her hands dripping dishwater. Her 3 young ones yelled louder than ever. The field mice twittered frantically. Mother tottered from her chair, and Uncle Analdus fell backward out of his. "Hush them blasted brats," he roared, scrambling to his feet. "How can anybody—" Everyone screamed questions at once. Phooey stamped the ground with his front paws. "Silence," he shouted, his plumy tail arched ever so slightly. "The first one says another word, I'll—" Silence fell at once, for Phooey never made idle threats. "Now, Willie," he said quietly, "go on with your story." Well, said Willie breathlessly, I was on the window sill. There's a new cover on the rain barrel, and I wanted to try it. And I did, and it's a good stout, too. And I was on the windowsill, and I looked in, and I saw him. I saw little Georgie. He was lying in her lap, the lady's, right in her lap. And how about them ding-blasted old cat? Interrupted Inaldus. Where was he? He was there. He was there, too. And he was washing little Georgie's face. At this, such an incredulous chattering broke out that Phooey was forced to arch his tail again. He was, too. He really was, Willie went on, ears and all. And Georgie seemed to like it. And once he bent his head down, and Mr. Muldoon, the cat, he scratched the back of Georgie's neck for him. Flea, likely, said Uncle Inaldus. And that's all I saw, and I thought you ought to know, so I came right away. And that's all. Did he seem all right? Mother asked breathlessly. Willie hesitated a moment. Well, he seemed to... Well, his hind legs, his jumping ones, seemed to be tied up, sort of with little sticks like and bandages. Could he walk? Said Father quickly. Well, I don't exactly know, sir. You see, he was just lying on her lap, the lady's lap, and I don't know, but he seemed real comfortable and happy like. Thank you, William, said Father. You are a good boy and a very observant and thoughtful one. We are overjoyed at your tidings and are deeply grateful. Anything further that you are able to discover we shall look forward to with the greatest eagerness. Belief and joy burst out in a flood of chatter, of questions and speculation. The glad news spread rapidly over the hill, and the gloom that had hung there began to dissolve like the morning mist. Everyone dropped in to offer congratulations. Mother, of course, was still worried, but there was a light in her eyes that had not been there since that terrible night. They filled with tears, however, when old Porky, the shy and solitary, always ill at ease in social gatherings, waddled awkwardly up and offered his gnarled, clay-encrusted paw. Ma'am, he said gruffly. Man, shucks. And he hastened away. Number 11 is called Strain and Strife. Bright and early next morning, Father and Uncle Inaldus started work on the new storeroom. The gloomy lethargy that had wrapped all the residents of the hill was completely gone. Mother bustled cheerily about in her housework, and at times even humming a bar or two of little Georgie's song. Hazel and her 3 characters were sent home with many thanks from Mother and Father and ill-conceived pleasure on the part of Uncle Inaldus. Now, maybe a feller can get a rest once in a while, "Thou having his ding-blasted ears shouted off," he grunted, shoveling bustily. As the days went by and the storeroom progressed, only one worry marveled the general happiness. Willie Fieldmouse had never been able to catch another glimpse of little Georgie. Each night he faithfully climbed the rain barrel and peered into the living room, but the folks had an upstairs sitting room now and seemed to spend most of their evenings there. All the animals kept their eyes and ears open, but none had ever heard or saw a trace of little Georgie. That he was still there, they felt sure, for early each morning the lady gathered a small basket of dew-soaked clover, carrot tops, fresh young lettuce leaves, or tender pea vines. From the quantity she gathered, they judged not only that Georgie was there, but that his appetite was excellent. The days merged into weeks, and with still no news, Midsummer's Eve was not far off, and the mounting anxiety caused tempers to grow short. In the case of Father and Uncle Inaldus, this irritability was increased by their unskilled attempts at carpentry. The storeroom shelves, which little Georgie could have built so easily, took them days and days and cost many pounded paws. When finished, the lopsided and rickety results seemed hardly worth the pain and labor they had spent on them. After pounding his thumb for the 4th time in succession, Uncle Inaldus threw down his hammer in rage and went off to visit with Porky. Irritation and worry had gradually caused a dark suspicion to take root in his mind, and he now proceeded to voice it. "Do you know," he said, "I don't trust these here new folks, not none. I'm plumb worried about little Georgie. Do you know what I think? What I think is they're holding him for a hostage. That's what they're doing. Mark my words now, come midsummer night, and the first time any one of 'em touches airy one of a ding-blasted vegetables, they'll torture him. That's what they're going to do, or maybe do away with him complete. They may be a-torturing him right now," he went on gloomily, "a-torturing and a-teasing and a-prying and a-trying to make him tell him about us, where our burrows is and all. So they's kin to set out poison and traps and spring guns, and how about them sticks tied onto his legs Willie was talking about? Some kind of torture machines likely. No, sir, I don't trust him. Don't trust that ding-blasted old cat neither. I'll kick him in the face yet." Uncle Inaldus' suspicion of foul play rapidly spread. It spread among the other animals and soon resulted in a bitter controversy. Mother and Father and the Red Buck refused to believe anything so evil of the new folks and were supported by the Gray Fox and Phooey, who both felt sure that folks who set out such bountiful garbage must be in all ways kind and good. But many of the other animals were inclined to side with Uncle Analdus. Arguments and quarrels grew more and more frequent, and as usual, many wild and sinister rumors were circulated. Lights had been seen in the folks' sitting room at late hours. Strange sounds had been heard. The possum, a notorious liar, claimed to have heard little Georgie screaming in pain. To make things worse, the spring rains came. Day after day, the low-hanging black clouds came scuttling in from the east, rolling across the valley and spilling incessant showers. A chilling northeast wind blew. Mist and dampness seeped down into the best-built burrows. On the walls, mildew and fungus appeared. Roofs leaked and chimneys smoked. The housebound animals shivered and hugged their hearths. It was good weather for gardens, but bad for dispositions. That's like how you feel as a person. Your mood. Each day through mud and drizzle, Father trampled the hill seeking tidings of little Georgie, returning drenched, mud-spattered, and somber. All day Uncle Analdus crouched over the fire, smoking the reeking pipe and muttering wild and gloomy forebodings. It was only natural that they should eventually quarrel. Bitter words were spoken. Mother wept as copiously as the driving clouds. As much. And Uncle Analdus wrathfully stamped from the burrow to take up his abode with Porky. There he became the ringleader of the rebellious element and spent his days adding fuel to the fires of suspicion and hate. Even Porky had to admit that he seemed to be slightly tetched, but the more ignorant animals eagerly swallowed every fantastic suspicion and became more and more worked up. Some of the more violent even suggested that the rules of the hill be thrown aside, and then without waiting for Midsummer's Eve, they at once lay waste the gardens and lawns, the buckwheat field, and the flower borders. That they ruthlessly slaughter every chicken duckling, every hen and rooster. At a painfully stormy meeting, it required all of Father's eloquence and all of Red Buck's authority to persuade the animals to abide by their ancient rules and customs. A shift in the wind and clearing weather also helped somewhat in soothing frayed nerves and strained relations. For some time now, Louis Kernstock had been working at something up near the end of the garden. It was a lovely spot, a tiny circular lawn sheltered by a great pine tree and sloping down into the rock garden. There were 2 stone benches there where the folks often sat on warm evenings, a custom which prevented the animals from thoroughly inspecting Louis's handiwork. There was considerable speculation as to what it would be, but Uncle Analdus soon had an explanation for it. "They were building a dungeon," he shouted. "They're building a dungeon for little Georgie. That's what they're doing, and they'll put him in it behind big iron bars, and he'll be a pining there, and every time any one of us touches a ding-blasted vegetable, they'll torture him and jab him and starve him and maybe pour boiling oil onto him." So Midsummer's Eve drew near in a seething atmosphere of suspicion, fear, and general unpleasantness. This was all added to by the arrival of a long and very heavy wooden packing case. It came on Tim McGrath's truck, and it took the combined efforts of Tim, Lottie, the man, and several helpers to unload it and move it on rollers to the little lawn under the pine tree where Louis's work was going on. At once, Uncle Analdus started a new rumor. "Traps and spring guns," he announced. "That's what's in there in them box, traps and spring guns, and likely poisons and gases." Whatever was in it was unpacked with a great deal of hammering. Louis and his helpers were very busy for a day or two more, with the folks continually stirring around in and out. It was not until the afternoon of the eve that the work was finished. Everything was cleaned up neatly, and whatever had been done was covered by one of Louis's canvas tarpaulins. I can't remember what that means. Something stood up in the center, making the canvas look rather like a tent as it shone there in the sunlight. Porky and Uncle Analdus regarded it suspiciously from a safe distance up the hillside. "It's a gallows," Uncle Analdus pronounced in a whisper. "It's a gallows, that's what it is, and they're going to hang poor little Georgie on it." Oh, my goodness. All right, it's time for the last chapter, chapter 12, so tune in on the next video.